Gail.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to be talking about using surveys to inform your distance teaching. I'm kind of curious, of course, I cannot see the messages at this point, but I'm curious, many of you are art teachers, but yay. But okay, Tyler, it's not. Oh, there I am. So this is what I was like a couple weeks ago. I still have a lot of questions about what my students are able to do at home, what kinds of materials they even have. Um, are their parents going to be available to help them, even especially with the real little ones that are not really reading yet, or they're just pre-reading? Is there going to be somebody there to help them with instructions and directions? So for about 2 weeks, we had a period of time where we were creating activities for the students, and it wasn't necessary for the kids to do them. It was just available for them. And then as those two weeks were going on, I realized I just have no idea about anything. So I had so many questions. And then I realized that there might be a way for me to ask my students. And that was the next best thing to a crystal ball or mind reading. It was SurveyMonkey. So just some of my context: I teach K-5 art. There's not one-to-one technology for the students in our school, and a lot of our families don't even have internet access. About 100 students are picking up packets once a week, and probably more should be, but they made a criteria for picking up those packets if there was any kind of technology at home, even like a smartphone. They encouraged families not to do the packets. And as I was beginning, there was no mandated platform for the learning. So I actually was trying something called Edmodo before I went into Google Classroom, and our first grade classes are using Flipgrid. And so we're trying to get it together for probably for the fall. But anyway, I started with my survey. So what I did was I wanted to determine the student interest, their access to materials, and how much their parents could be involved. And with SurveyMonkey, I created a 10-question survey because the 10-question survey is free. And so I wanted to stick with that. And also the other thing about having a shorter survey is I was hoping that I would get a better response. And I think it took on average 3 minutes for families that chose to do the survey to complete it. So I wanted something that didn't take a long time. So then you have to think about, why is this important? Why is it important for me to get to know the families or the kids? And John Dewey, he said it really well, that the teacher should become intimately acquainted with the conditions of the local community, physical, historical, economic, occupational, etc., in order to utilize them as educational resources. A system of education must take these things constantly into account. And I think it's really important that we remember that we really need to know our families and the communities that our kids are coming from so that we can serve them, because that's what we're here for. So the 3 areas, as I said, were student interest, material access, and the level of parental involvement. And I just wanted to give a tip to you. As you design your survey, you want to think about what you want to learn about and from your students. It may be different than the kinds of things I wanted to know. So, how to create a survey using SurveyMonkey. We'll just do a little quick tour. Um, okay, so this is my I have a dashboard, and I have on the side, I don't know if I can get to it. Yeah, I have my surveys. So the other thing is um, for the free survey, you can't get that many responses back. I remember what the number is, but it was enough for each of my classrooms. So that's why I made a separate survey for each of the classrooms that I taught. So we'll just look at my 5th grade survey. And you have an opportunity to see the design of the survey. So this is the design. And you have a choice of a different formats. Like I chose some check boxes so I could find out what they wanted to cover in the 5 weeks that we were going to be having some mandated programming. So I gave them some options, and then I recommend having additional comments, because you just never know what you're going to find out just from having that empty box. And then I asked a question about how much involvement the parents could have. And as I started writing the question, I was thinking about, how can I say this to the parents without offending them? So I really tried to word it in a way that I just really wanted to know what they could do with their kids or what they couldn't without insulting them. So, you want to think about your audience, and you want to be respectful. And then at the time, like, I just wasn't really thinking too much about what kinds of responses I was going to get. So I started with different art making methods. And so I asked them about drawing materials they might have at home, painting materials, collage materials, sculptural materials, whether or not they had access to the school's website. And what I realized was anybody that was filling out the survey had access to the website, and that the people that weren't filling out the survey were the ones that didn't have access. So the input that I got was from the families that had access. And so you need to think about also, what are some ways that you're going to reach families that may not have direct access to the survey, and you might ask the same kinds of questions through a phone call. And then I wanted parents to understand that there was an expectation that students needed to do work every week. So I just made a section for that. And then the last part is just an open area where they could tell me what their children were interested in, and any questions that they had. So that's a preview. And then this is where I could collect my responses, and you're given an option of different ways that you can do it. And for me, I just thought the easiest way would be to create a web link, which I did. I created a link for each survey, and I emailed them through our school email system. And so there's different ways you could purchase something, you could post it on Facebook and social media. Like, I did consider, we have a PTA that has a big Facebook presence. I did consider posting it on the PTA's Facebook page, but in the end, I didn't. And then you get some really cool results. So let's see. So you get these graphs, and you can see visually. So I saw that most of the families, what they were concerned about was that their kids have fun while they were doing these projects. But I also saw that they had other interests, like kids were interested in learning how to draw, learning about the elements and principles, learning about famous artists, and all of the above. So it gave me an idea that it wasn't just about having fun, but they were really looking for content. And so as I've designed my lessons, I've kept that in mind. And then the other thing with this fifth grade class, um, nobody was too overwhelmed. Everybody was willing to, or they felt that they could be involved with their kids' education and helping them. And then through the art materials, I saw that everybody had paper and pencil, so that was a good thing. But not everybody had other materials. And so because of that, I realized that I couldn't make mandated lessons surrounding art materials, that the lessons needed to be about something different. And then here's like some sculpture materials. And of course, everybody that filled it out had access to the website. And then this was an interesting section because this told me in here through the family comments, just specific things about the individual children that I'm teaching. So I really liked that. So I want to say I am not a SurveyMonkey expert, and all of these packages are created so that you can play around with them and figure it out. So I'm not going to go through I'll just show you. So if I wanted to create a survey, I could do it real quick. I'll just do a 2-question survey. What's nice is they can build one for you. You can start from a template. So I actually looked at the templates and I looked at the education ones. And I recommend that you do that because there's like this looks like a really good survey here. And I just recommend looking at other surveys just to get an idea of what a good survey would be. So I went through that and I got some ideas about how to create my own. So I'm going to go back to the slideshow because I'll show you here that when you're creating your survey, you want to make sure you want to really try to keep those questions non-judgmental and unbiased, because you don't want to show like your opinion about anything, or you don't want to offend anybody. You really want it to be open, and you want to get honest responses from children and families. And then I'm just going to show you here because it's a little easier for me to see. These are all the different choices of the kinds of questions you can ask. You could ask a multiple choice question or a checkbox, or you could have students or parents rate things. So there's a lot to choose from. And there's an option on whether or not you want the certain question that you ask to be answered or not. And I left a couple of the questions unrequired, and I recommend that you not do that. I recommend that you make all your questions required, because you just can get so much from each answer, even if it's just checking off a box. And then you need to figure out how you're going to get that link to your respondents, and I used email. So these are some of my lessons learned, some of my takeaways. That creating surveys takes practice, and your first survey really might not ask the questions that you really wanted to have answered, but it's okay. You just do it. And like this was a good practice run, the survey that I did now for the fall. And then the other thing is I might do another survey at the end of this learning, in June, again, just to, get some information from families before I start planning for the fall. The other thing is not everybody is going to respond to your survey, and you have to decide for yourself what response rate is acceptable for you. You might have to strategize how to get the word out. Like I said, maybe for the next survey I do, maybe I will utilize our PTA's Facebook page and put the link up there in addition to all of the emails that I'm sending out. Because something I learned, I don't know about all of you, but I have a lot of parents that aren't reading my emails. And, I'm begging them just to get like a little information from them. They're just not even opening up their email. They're so overwhelmed. And then I had mentioned this before, but within the survey, opt to have required responses because otherwise you might have a lot of unanswered questions remaining. So in specific to teaching art, these are things that I learned. I learned that to create equitable lessons, the theme each week could not be about the supplies and materials or art making methods. And so I gave them choice art projects with flexibility in the materials that they use. So these are the big ideas that I've been focusing on. So I just tried to think of a logical progression. So the first week we focused on using the elements and principles of art. Really, it was just the elements. And then last week we focused on observing as artists, and I'll show you some of the choice boards. This week, artists use their imagination is our theme. Next week, it's going to be about telling stories. And then I thought a really nice way to end would be artist experiment and play. And I'm going to give them all kinds of recipes for paper mache glue and different sculptural materials that they could make at home, different things that found object art, and then of course some paper and pencil art, because for some students the only way they're going to be able to experiment is with a pencil. So this is my sample lesson. So I kind of have figured out a little format. So every week I start with an intro with some information. And then I create a choice board each week. So I try to have like a variety of materials that students could use, but I made it clear that any of these choices could be done with a paper and pencil, but they're welcome to try other things if they wish. And then I thought it was important for the kids to reflect and to find out if they learned anything in that week. So I have them complete an art reflection every week. And then this past week, I also made a little rubric in the form, it's really not a rubric, it's a checklist. Just because I found that when kids were submitting things, not everything was submitted. So, and also not everybody was doing their best work. And since for a lot of art teachers, we see our students every year, for many of our students, like for myself, many of my students, I've seen their work. I know what they can do. So I really wanted to encourage them to do their best. So here are some practical tips. You want to read through the sample educational surveys on SurveyMonkey to get a feel for how good questions are written. I encourage you to write a brief introduction to your survey and create a logical order to your questions. You have the option to have an additional comments box with all your questions, and I suggest having it because it's a great way of getting information that you might not have even thought to ask about. And then if you have more than 10 questions and you want to stick to the free format, create a short answer question format. And in that way, you can ask two questions in one, which is what I did at the end, because I had really wanted to have two separate questions. One, is there anything specific that you want to ask me? And then the other one, tell me things about your child that I might not know. But I only had one question left, so I just combined them. So that's something that you can do. So some of my next steps are continuing to create surveys, whether distance learning or whether or not we're in our bricks and mortar building. And because I really feel there's, even within a bricks and mortar building, I have not had the conversations with parents that I've had through these surveys. So, maybe a classroom teacher who has every single student's family visit them on Meet the Teacher Night doesn't have that issue, but I don't meet all my families the same way. So this survey was a really good way of connecting one-on-one with families. And then my next steps are really just to brainstorm other ways to virtually connect with students and families. And I'm looking for ideas. So please, if you have found that there's things that are working for you, I really would like to learn about them. And then here we are, questions and answers.